Hey everybody, Michael Snyder here, Pacific Northwest Weather Watch. Today's December 13th, and right now we're looking at the infrared slash visible satellite imagery here. You can see the sun rising across North America here. You can see our cutoff low over the Pacific Ocean shown here. Ridge building across Pacific Northwest, going to kick some offshore flow, keep us dry for a few days here. But what everybody wants to know about, of course, is how cold are we going to get, and are we going to get any snow, and what's going to happen here as we go on in through this weekend into next week. Well, if you look here across the Aleutians in western Alaska, if you look way out here to the upper left here, you can see the energy that's going to ride across the top of this ridge, across the Yukon, down through British Columbia here, and try to make it into the Pacific Northwest there. So that's what we're going to be watching here over the next few days. You've probably seen a lot of different snow maps out there and different ideas from different people involved in the Northwest weather community here, and we'll try to go over some of that stuff as we go. Now, taking a look over here, I wanted to show you Siberia. You can really see it here on the infrared satellite imagery, just how cold they are over there. This is Japan shown here. Here's Korea, north and south, and Russia is up here. You can see that very cold air shown in the infrared satellite imagery here. And this is that energy. It's going to ride over the top of the ridge. A little bit of that polar air is going to move across over the top of that ridge down towards the Pacific Northwest there. So kind of interesting here. The infrared satellite is, it's infrared. It picks up heat, and you can kind of see that very cold air mass over Russia here. It's kind of dominating their weather recently. Now, taking a look here, again, I'm talking about the black ice. We talk about things out in the future here and snowstorms and whatnot, but this is what gets people, is this black ice out there. You can't see it. Watch out. Just because your car thermometer says 36, 37 degrees doesn't mean that there isn't a layer of ice on the roadway there. So watch out for that. Now, taking a look here, cold temperatures ahead. We are getting increasing confidence here in some very cold weather moving down here across Pacific Northwest, especially east of the Cascades, interior of British Columbia. You can see some of these temperatures here on the National Weather Service map by Monday, December 19th. There's looking at some areas below 0 Fahrenheit, folks. So watch out. You can see all the precautions out here and what to do. A great graphic here from the National Weather Service Spokane. This is for Missoula here too, talking about December 19th through 24th out there. 24th, they give some probabilities for north central Idaho, western Montana. Look at this. There's even some chance of negative 20 Fahrenheit and below. Same would go for the interior of British Columbia as well. So be prepared for hazardous cold weather conditions. Freezing fog is going to be out there as well. Lower Columbia Basin, Washington, Oregon through Tuesday morning. Just watch out for that. Slow down a little bit. But, try not to just come to a complete stop there on the highways here. That's how those huge fog pileups occur. Now, taking a look here, this is down from Medford, Oregon. We are going to get some air stagnation where we're not getting some of the stronger offshore winds here as we go through the week here. Some frost could form and deteriorating air quality around the region. So decent graphic there from Medford, Oregon. Now taking a look at North America, this is the European last night's run. This is 700 millibars, about 10,000 feet. If we look way off up here to the north and west here, this is where that colder air is going to be coming from. And let's put this into motion and I'll show you. See that cutoff low over the Pacific Ocean here. Here comes our lobe riding up over the top of this ridge, going through Alaska, down through the Yukon, into the British Columbia area here, and towards the Pacific Northwest. And look at this extreme cold setting up shop here over British Columbia here by the time we're getting into Sunday afternoon shown there. And you can see it really engulf western and central Alaska shown there. And then you can see it start to kick off to the east rather quickly on some of these runs here, but we could get a messy transition on the backside of this with cold air in place. We'll take a look at some of those scenarios a little bit today and mainly in the days up leading to this event here coming up. We don't want to get too caught up in the details just yet. But now we're looking at the European ensemble. This is actually last night's run, the 06Z. Let's go with that 144 hours here. And you can see this energy rounding here. This is what we're watching. You can see this drive down across the Yukon and British Columbia here. Ridge is out here. And I'll show you something else coming up here in a moment. It depends on the strength of this ridge, how far it retreats to the west, how far north it goes. Is it going to allow this cold air to spill out, or is it going to drive it down across the Pacific Northwest? Are all good questions at this point, and we really don't know with much certainty how that's going to play out yet. But the confidence is increasing for this very cold air mass to be taking up shop here across British Columbia. As you can see, that polar lobe just kind of spinning over southwest BC at this point here. This would be Sunday night. Now here we're looking at yesterday afternoon's European map. We've got sea level pressure, we've got precipitation values. Put this into motion here. You can see that weak impulse move through eastern British Columbia, down into the Idaho Panhandle, western Montana here, as this pushes off through eastern Idaho, down towards Utah and Wyoming at that point. Pacific Northwest, pretty dry at this point. You see the nice high pressure in place across BC, eastern Oregon, and you'll see this cutoff low out of the Pacific Ocean here, well offshore. Put this into motion here. We go on into Friday morning now, and now we're on into Saturday morning. Finally, that Arctic front starts to make its arrival across BC here, acting as a wedge, wringing out that moisture in front of that Arctic air mass as it moves south across the region. Some of this is bound to leak out over the Pacific Ocean. It looks like it's causing some troughing here on last night's European run. Some interesting convergence zones, maybe a modified Arctic front could move down the Puget Sound shown here. We're going on into Sunday at this point. On into Monday morning, you see the troughing still hanging around. It's very cold air in place over British Columbia at this point. You can see the scattered snow bands across Pacific Northwest at this point. Go on to the future a little bit more. We dry out again as very cold air overtakes the region here on in through mid next week. And then we're going to have some systems try to approach here with some very cold air in place. Could be a messy transition as well. Now taking a look here, we're looking at the snow map. Kuchera ratio, European. I just wanted to give you an idea what's coming here. There's that first impulse. Don't sleep on this one if you're out there in western Montana, eastern Idaho. That will bring some measurable snowfall. Could have some impacts. So watch out for that Wednesday on into Wednesday night here. Now you see we dry out. No snow expected Thursday or Friday, but going to Saturday morning, you can see the snowfall start to pile up in front of that Arctic front here and start to bring some of that moisture off the Pacific here. Some interesting convergent zones again. Maybe a modified Arctic front there. Big totals for the Cascades, Rockies, Northeast Oregon, all the way down through the coastal ranges. Could get some measurable snowfall out of this as well. Kick that off into the future there. And then you can see maybe another system very late in the period here. But at this point here, it's very low confidence on what kind of system is going to come in after that. Right now, we're just trying to concentrate on this initial Arctic air mass moving into the region. Now taking a look at the winds. You got Washington, Oregon here. As we go on in through Wednesday afternoon, evening, nighttime, you see this start to kick up through the gorge here. Stampede Gap winds get going by late Thursday morning. Fraser River Gap winds going. You can see the northeast component, offshore flow going on. Maybe some sun breaks here for Thursday and Friday as we continue that offshore flow. Then we start to get these northwest winds coming down the coastline in advance of that Arctic front. Look at the Fraser River Gap winds coming in here very early Sunday morning. Northwest flow down the Strait of Georgia here. Could be some interesting convergent zone activity up there at this point. Northerlies start to come down the Puget Sound. Might get a modified Arctic front with that, or some interesting convergent zones as moisture continues to come off the ocean here. You can see also the Okanagan River Valley here bringing some, that's a cold air conduit, bringing some nice cold air down into eastern Washington shown there. So a lot of different possibilities here when Arctic air enters the region. When we go out into mid next week, you can see the Fraser River Gap really roaring at this time. The gorge winds going, bringing Arctic air all across down to the coast of Oregon potentially here as we go through midweek coming up. Now taking a look here, we're going to look at actual temperatures. I picked Celsius here because you can see the freezing line better. You can see where the freezing line is up through southwest BC, down the Cascades, all the way towards California here. Now I wanted to show you just what's coming here. We're going to speed ahead here. We're now into Saturday afternoon. You can clearly see that Arctic air sagging south across British Columbia here, overtakes western Washington, pushes all the way down through Oregon eventually as we go through midweek here. So very cold air coming. You can see high confidence for BC, eastern Washington, eastern Oregon here. How much cold air will get west of the Cascades is still yet to be determined at this point. But you can see very high confidence here in the cold air arriving. Now, taking a look at the dew point, I wanted to show you the dryness of an Arctic air mass here. So let's put this into motion. You can see pretty dry air still east of the Cascades, but look at this Arctic air mass just overtake the region here. Look at some of these values into central BC here. Just incredible. Negative 40 Celsius is negative 40 Fahrenheit also at this point. So as you can see, look at this overtake western Washington down into western Oregon at this point as well. So we're going to have some pretty cold air locked into place. And depending on what kind of systems then come in, we could even bring some a messy transition back to warmer conditions as we go through later next week. But that's way off in fantasy land. We'll worry about that later. Now taking a look here at the GFS, 850 millibars, 5,000 feet. I just wanted to show you how abnormally cold this air mass is moving in aloft. Here we go on into Friday now. Going into Saturday morning, there comes the arrival of this Arctic air mass that pushes down across BC and Alberta. And then we get that system moving in underneath the ridge there. Monday night, Tuesday. Then you can see the Arctic air reinforcing across Pacific Northwest according to the GFS here, and watch this spread all the way down towards Texas through the extended, if you believe the GFS there. But just pointing out the extent of the cold here. Look at this, just overtakes the entire Pacific Northwest according to the GFS. Now we'll look at what the GFS has to say about precipitation values. You can see the initial system through Idaho, Montana, could even clip portions of eastern Washington, Oregon there. Got to be careful with this one, could bring some disruptive snowfall with it. But then we dry out for a couple of days, Thursday, Friday, going on to Saturday. Here comes that Arctic air mass coming down. GFS does not show the same trophy, and the European does here with the initial arrival of the Arctic air mass. But what it does show is another system then coming off the Pacific here, which we have pretty dynamic snowfall here for mainly western Washington through southwest BC here. But again, the European does not show that feature as of now. So you can see what kind of inconsistencies we are dealing with here in the models. Now taking a look here, I just wanted to show you guys this. You're probably going to see some of these maps showing up on your social media feeds here. This is yesterday afternoon's run. Some of these ridiculous snowfalls showing up across western Washington versus this morning's here too. It's not impossible that we can get big snowfall events out of this, but really you got to take these with a grain of salt here. These are not going to be of high confidence as of yet. So just pointing that out just for a general knowledge there for you. Now taking a look here, this is the European. This is actually last night's run here, and you can see this area of energy here in the ridge developing here across the Aleutians right now. That's what we're watching. Watch this energy move over the top of the ridge here, down through the Yukon Northwest Territories into BC here and open up on the Pacific Northwest, the ridge driving this cold air down into our region here. And it depends on where this ridge sets up. How strong is the flow going to be? Is it going to push this down out over the coast of BC back into the Pacific Northwest and bring us a nice snowstorm with the arrival of this Arctic air? Or this ridge looks like it creeps a little bit far north here and doesn't quite drive this cold air down here in some of the more recent runs. So we're still trying to work out these details here, but the cold air does look like high confidence here coming up. So I back up here and you can kind of see the track of that energy as it moves across western Alaska over the top of the ridge here down through Yukon and into BC shown there. So that's what we're watching. The further south this slope goes, the better the Arctic blast is going to be here across places west of the Cascades. Now looking here, this is temperature anomaly according to the European yesterday afternoon's run. You can see we're still below average here for these next few days, especially east of the mountains here, going into Saturday morning. And you can clearly see this Arctic air make its way down here across the area, really sagging south as we go on in through Wednesday across the region. Look at some of these values, -60. Some area out here is -60 below average here at the surface. There's an incredibly cold air mass, but you'll see it kind of kicks out pretty quickly there, or starts to move off to the east at least. But when this Arctic air gets in here, it's usually much harder to move than what the models say. So we have to be really careful. We could be setting up for a nasty transition, some kind of ice event, freezing rain, snowstorm. Who knows at this point? It's all fantasy right now. Now, I've been showing this last couple days here, but this is a 10-day precipitation anomaly here. We're not getting those moist Pacific Ocean storms into our region, so we're really building up this deficit here. This is shown as a actually this December 22nd afternoon here, 10 days out on the European run. Now, looking at the European yesterday afternoon, you can see that cold air clearly making its arrival here Monday. Some pretty chilly temperatures showing up at this point right now. We'll see how that trends here in the next couple of days. Look at the GFS, some just ridiculous temperatures showing up here. So if you see this on your social media, take this with a grain of salt. These are probably not going to happen here. That would be 1 degree off the all-time record low for SeaTac. Do not count on that happening. Now looking at the European here, you can see some of these ensemble members do have some snowfall in here, but you can see a lot of them are very light or dry at this point. So there's a lot to be worked out here. And then there's a potential for more systems out off into the extended here during a messy transition potentially as we get closer to Christmas time there. Now looking at Spokane, you can see some of these daytime highs in the control run are below zero here coming up. Some really cold air, high confidence east of the mountains especially. And the control even has some of these temperatures approaching -20 Fahrenheit here as we go through on into next week. This is for Kamloops, just kind of showing you the agreement here for that very cold air mass setting up shop over the interior of BC. This is for eastern Oregon as well. You'll see some disagreement here though as you start to move on through next week. You can see some warmer temperatures up into the 40s here in this cluster of ensembles there, but some very cold temperatures also showing up. So we're kind of all over the place as we go in through later next week. We'll have a lot to work out here, folks. Now taking a look at Plainfield, Everett up there, you can see some of these control run temperatures down in the single digits potentially here, but you can see some warmer air around as well. You don't know how this is going to develop, but the Arctic air mass moves off the coast of BC for some reason, and there's cyclogenesis out over the Gulf of Alaska. We could get much warmer air back into the Pacific Northwest versus these colder temperatures. So there is a lot to work out as we go on through the next few days here. So here's some research I've been doing for SeaTac Airport here, but this goes for much of the Pacific Northwest. This is for 1950 to 2022. This is average monthly temperature here, and you can clearly see the signal for colder conditions during La Nina years shown here, especially versus El Nino years. This is for 1980 to 2022. You can clearly see that signal exists for this time frame as well. Average rainfall per the entire season, October through April here. You can clearly see that signal from 1950, 2022 favors La Nina there as well. Also from 1980, even though the amounts did drop off here for this time frame. Peak wind gust per month, La Nina dominates here too versus neutral and El Nino conditions. This is the average peak wind per month for October through April there. Now this is from 1980 to 2022. You can see La Nina again dominating here. Average thunderstorms per month, there wasn't much of a signal here, so we're not going to go into that too much. Dense fog, you can see La Nina actually wanes a little bit here, probably because a little bit more windy conditions, maybe a little bit more breezy, not as much stagnant conditions, I guess. That's my guess versus El Nino and neutral conditions shown here. 1980, same thing there as well. Now looking at average total snowfall during the season, October through April from 1950 to 2022. Look at that signal there for La Nina seasons versus neutral or El Nino, clearly more during La Nina years. 1980 still there, but look at neutral kind of evens it up a bit there, but El Nino kind of a pitiful 3.6 for the entire season of October through April on average. Now, rainiest month. Which month do you think is the rainiest month here? Let's go. La Nina, November La Nina is here with 7.12 average from 1980 to 2022. During the month of November, it tends to be the wettest month. Now, what's the highest peak wind gust from 1980 to 2022? December El Ninos average an incredible 47.4 max wind gust per the month of December during El Ninos from 1980 to 2022. Foggiest month, October El Ninos, 5.8 dense fog days reported there on average. Coldest month, December La Ninas with a 37.8 average mean temperature from 1980 to 2022 for SeaTac. Snowiest month, La Nina, December's, and that's what we're in right now. Can we add to that total this month? We will see here, folks. So anyway, yeah, thought you guys might enjoy that one. That's some of my research here for Seattle and the ENSO conditions across the equatorial Pacific there. But yeah, cutoff low coming up here. We're going to build the ridge. We're going to do some offshore flow going on here for the next few days. Then we're going to bring this energy across the top of the ridge, drop it down across British Columbia. Very cold air will be arriving. How will it interact? How much snow we're going to get? We just don't know quite the details just yet, but we do have some potential here west of the Cascades for some snowfall, as well as for pretty much anywhere else across Pacific Northwest, as the confidence in this cold air arriving is very high. So anyway, yeah, click like, subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys again tomorrow. We'll do this all over again. We'll check out what the models have to say, and we'll try to get a little bit more consistency in these model runs coming up here. So I will talk to you guys then.